I am shocked to tell you that I have achieved not only platinum, but adamantine best-selling status on Drivethru. That means it's in the top 239 out of 168,000 products.
Hello, Internet, and welcome back to Templar's Tabletop. And as you can tell, we already have a very special episode today because we are doing an interview with a very special creator. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nathan Rockwood, a teacher of English, at least formerly, and now game design at a high school in Maryland. I'm the owner of Larcenous Designs and creator of the GameMaster's Apprentice.
Wow. As a former teacher, hearing that a full-time game design teacher, for all of you nerds watching out there, it is possible. You can achieve your dream job. But today we're going to be talking about a couple cool products we'll take a look at. But really, it's just kind of fun to talk to somebody in the indie RPG space and see what it's like to actually be part of that, creating games, making things, designing things. So let's go ahead and get started. So Nathan, let's start off with what got you into the RPG hobby? How did you start, and kind of what's your background in that area?
Well, I've been a gamer since early middle school. I found my parents' first edition, actually it wasn't even called first edition, of course, but D&D Basic and Expert box sets. My friends and I tried them out, played a little while, and after running out of content and not really understanding some of that content, we decided to make our own similar games because our allowance money could not afford hardbound books that cost extremely high dollar figures even at that time. So we just sort of got into writing our own work, and that was actually not my initiative. A friend of mine got us into sort of like that space, and the three of us would hang out and play these games that he was writing, and that showed me it was possible. And over the course of the next several years, middle school, high school, I just played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We played games we wrote. We wrote our own adventures and spent probably way too much time playing games instead of doing homework. It really, I think it did actually help me in some ways because it helped with my math and my ability not just to read and write quickly, but to go back and edit and check things that I had already done. And I think sort of helped me down the path that eventually led to me becoming an English teacher.
That's awesome. I've always noticed it's interesting in this hobby to see that there's always this correlation between liking to play the game, but also creating your own content. I think there's just an innate creativity that comes with it. Speaking of creativity, how did you go from somebody that was a consumer of product to something that you were making your own stuff and eventually actually like professionally publishing?
So that was a little of multiple things, many things, of course. As I mentioned, was sort of like trying out that as a very amateur hobbyist kind of personal thing. And like you say, a lot of gamers are writers and creators in other parts of this hobby, whether they are an artist or a game designer in a personal sense. As soon as you create something, you are a designer, even if you are not trying to publish it. And so that's part of this, the heart of this hobby. And I'm really excited that it's something that I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to take professional. Essentially, when I was a freshman in college, I was a big fan of the TV show Firefly. I had been playing a Firefly-based GURPS game with my high school friends, went off to college, Googled Firefly RPGs to see what other people were doing, and discovered a forum post by a person who was recruiting for an RPG playtest group that they could not officially name drop, but that the people on the Serenity movie forum for the upcoming movie would find shiny. And I jumped on that immediately. It was just like, OMG, I can't believe I might get the chance to playtest this RPG set in this world that I really appreciated at the time. I not only was indeed fortunate enough to playtest the Serenity RPG with my friends as a freshman in college, but during the last 2 weeks of the school year, one of which was my final exam week, I received an email asking me if I would like to write a chapter in the book, but I only had about 2 to 3 weeks to do it because they needed to publish and a real adult author had dropped out. And so they needed a college student who wrote too much and spent too much time working on this thing to pick up the slack. And I was extremely lucky to be able to have that opportunity, but I was also very much grateful that I had the skill set necessary to do it. So luck is a big part of it, but you got to put in that time to sort of be ready for that opportunistic moment when you can take advantage of the fact that there's a space you can fill where you can make something that other people actually want or need. And, that was insanely lucky. I will never ever get over how fortunate I became in that moment, because even though they were offering a very small amount of money for a single chapter in a book, I was able to impress them enough with my writing to, earn, say it was about 3 times, 4 times as much writing on the Battlestar Galactica role-playing game, the following year. And so I sort of freelanced through college, instead of having a normal summer job.
That's awesome. And I think it's cool how you say it's that combination of preparation, and enjoyment and passion, and then opportunity. So that's so cool to hear. And in right now, I see in the indie space, there are so many people that are putting out their own games on itch or in Drivethru, and I think it's a cool encouragement that keep putting in the work, and you never know when the opportunity will strike. So that's really cool to hear. So your products, I became familiar with them. I was a big fan of a lot of solo role playing podcasts and actual plays, and I eventually heard of them through one of those, and I picked it up. And how did you develop? I mean, it's RPG is already a little bit of a niche. How did you kind of set yourself or find the path of solo supplements and get into that specific realm?
The real answer is that it did not initially start as a solo RPG, product. The GameMaster's Apprentice, I originally created as a deck of index cards with names from a baby name website written on them, because I was literally just running out of names when GMing. I had become, by the end of high school, I had become my group's perpetual game master. I wanted to play my own games, but I hadn't even thought of the possibility of solo RPGs, beyond traditional game books. And so when I was initially setting out, I literally just took index cards, wrote some names on them, and then I realized there's a lot more room. So I also wrote, I think it was some loot charts basically onto them, because I really loved randomizing loot from the old D&D Dungeon Master's core book. So that was a thing that I just had with me then, and I could use in my sessions when I was running games. With that being true, I very quickly realized, oh, I could probably put yes, no questions on here, and I didn't understand the concept of an oracle at that time, so I didn't really get into the space of thinking through all the possible ways you could use an oracle, but simply yes, no answers, and then I added an A, B, or C, so there would be a tripartite result if you wanted to choose one of 3 things, and I just went from there. And I initially did them by hand, and over the course of my high school career, it was just like junior and senior year, this was just sort of that set of index cards. And then as a college student, when I was working on the Serenity role-playing game, I was using them to test ideas for the fan content. Essentially, I was writing as a playtester. I hadn't been hired yet, but I was producing, adventures to use with my group to test the system. And I used the cards to sort of run those for myself, and in that case, it was almost mimicking being a player and seeing what the player did, and deciding, "Oh, the player makes the obvious decision or decides to do something crazy that you didn't expect," and helped me sort of prep for that.
That's really cool to hear. It's kind of fun to, I feel very like a cool opportunity to see the secret sauce. For those that are not familiar with this product, we're about to talk about it, but the product that I'm referring to is the Game Master's Apprentice. We'll try to go ahead and go over here to this camera. So I've got 3 sets of decks here. This is the original deck, which I started off playing with. I even got it card sleeved. But for those that are unfamiliar, I've got a video actually that talks about it on my channel, but there's a lot of different options on here. NPC names, little bits of sensory detail, dice rolling, et cetera, and I'll let him explain a little bit more. Then I also found, which is so funny, I didn't realize that you also made this as well, but I had this middle deck, which was more picture-based, and I really like this one for getting quick prompts. And then finally, what we'll talk about at the end of the video, this second edition, which kind of combines some of the features and has some updates pertaining to that. But go ahead and tell us a little bit more about the Game Master's Apprentice and how that all coalesced. And I believe it's like, is it a platinum bestseller? Am I in the presence of greatness here?
It's so I am shocked to tell you that statistically, yes, I am weird in that I have achieved not only platinum, but adamantine best-selling status on Drivethru with that original deck that you were showing there, my very first solo product. That means it's in the top 239 out of 168,000 products.
And
It's like for 0.01%.
And for context, anybody that's watching that's not an RPG nerd, which if you're here, thank you for being here. But Drivethru RPG is one of the top RPG selling websites. And so this is an incredible feat. So yeah, continue. I just wanted to make sure people had that.
Well, thank you. I still think it's absolutely nuts, and I'm really grateful that people like the thing as well. So the Game Master's Apprentice, like I said, started off as a deck of cards with names on it for primarily GMing traditional group-based games where I was running a game and needed content on the fly. The real origin story of that style of GMing for me is that I had been a prepper GM beforehand. I had written out huge campaign documents. I had taken notebooks and filled them up by hand. But then one time when I had spent an entire summer prepping a campaign in D&D's Planescape setting that I was really passionate about at the time, I set it up. We played the first session, and my friends burned down the quest giver's bar and killed the quest giver. And I realized that even though, of course, I could just tell them not to, or ask them not to, or roll with it and change things, I was like, you know what? They have a completely different vision for what they're doing than I did. Throwing that all out the window, and rather than telling them no, I just started doing the pantser style GMing. If you're familiar with the concept of prepping versus pantsing, flying by the seat of your pants, I just went with it. And so I'd already been using the cards as names, and this was very helpful at that point. And then I just like added more over the years. And so essentially I created the cards thinking that they would be primarily for GMing spontaneously, but not necessarily for solo gaming. But during the process of trying to sort of perfect them, which happened only years later, after think I started working on them in 2006, really formally, I made like a slightly printable copy that I made in Microsoft Word. Um, in 2012, I believe it was, a friend of mine saw them and was like, "You should finish this and sell it." And I was not sure that that would go anywhere, but I gave it a shot. And a graphic designer friend of a friend, Max Johnson, who is now a great friend of mine and has been instrumental in making this happen, took the demo prototypes I'd made them prettier, helped me fit a little bit more into the cards, and then we decided that we could, market it. And we tried a Kickstarter, and it was wildly successful way beyond what I'd wanted. And I was stupid, and I put stretch goals in, and I made them $500 apart, and I wound up with like 14 stretch goals I had to fulfill. And I was I had planned ahead, fortunately, so I was able to publish my original deck of cards on my original timeline, so nobody was mad at me for missing my deadlines. But then I had 2 more years of work ahead of me
Wow.
to make the additional genre decks, sci-fi, etc. at that time. And it was brilliant, and I loved it, but it was a lot of work that I had not really understood I was buying myself.
Absolutely.
And so during that time, that was when a lot of people started talking about them as a solo gaming product, and I had already mentioned that they could be used to run games, but I hadn't really thought of that as a primary function. It was just a cool side benefit. And then I got into it myself at that point. People pointed me at other products that were very similar. I already knew about the existence of the Mythic GameMaster emulator, which if you're not familiar with, obviously anybody listening to this video, you should go check it out. It's a great tool, and it does something similar. So I was like told I should go play that more. And then a friend told me about, I forget when, this may have been later, but Ironsworn, another solo game that has its own Oracle system. And so over the next several years, while I was writing the new editions, the new genres of the Game Master's Apprentice, I was learning so much about how solo gaming can really work beautifully. And so I learned a lot more about how oracles work. And that's why I created the image-based product that you had there, the Deck of Tales, I call it. And I then went on and added more similar content to the Game Master's Apprentice. And while I'm still very, very happy with the first editions, this second edition that we eventually created was informed by truly understanding the possibility of solo gaming as an amazing way to have fun without needing to break any of the original like usefulness for traditional game mastering.
Yeah.
And I I've just been blown away by how successful that has been, both for my own personal gaming and as a small business that allows me to not have a boring summer job.
I love what you mentioned there about this idea of low prep game mastering. That's one of the pillars of this channel: affordable, approachable, and awesome. And approachable, for anyone that is looking for, just kind of like the methodology there, having tools that you can use or processes that you can use to set up things quickly, to think on the fly. It's really liberating, because oftentimes you spend so much time prepping something, but then your players are going to have a pretty similar experience, kind of regardless the level of your prep. But when they are really able to interact with it, interject their ideas, and go quickly with the story and come up with things on the fly. I ran a session just the other day where I had a whole little subplot that was based on a banshee come up just from one of these cards. And so it was a really cool thing to see, where it's your ideas plus your players' ideas plus random ideas all coming together for a really cool story. The next one I wanted to ask you about is kind of about the iterative process. You said you started off in a Microsoft Word document. My own project started off as a Google Sheets, and it still mostly is. But basically, talk a little bit about, like, what's the iterative process? I see a lot of creators, they put out something, it's not the best at first, and that can be a little disheartening. What does it look like to iterate and to see that work develop over time and continue to improve and to collaborate and all that stuff?
So I think that's a great question. I myself am not a graphic designer or an artist, but I have always been interested in trying to sort of mess around with the tools that I have available. And back in the day, for me, it started off as just dragging boxes around in Microsoft Word, making tiny text boxes. And anybody, if you're out there and you're my generation of Microsoft Word user, remember how if you move a tiny box a tiny millimeter, everything else moves and the entire page is broken. And so I was trying to make it such that I could print a sheet of paper and have 9 cards on it, 3 by 3, and it was a nightmare. But it was deeply satisfying too, because then I eventually would get there, I'd make something, and then I remember I would print it out at a local print shop who had card stock, and I would cut them apart. It's been hours dealing with, like, cutting rounded corners just because I wanted to. And it felt really good to make something I could hold in my hands and just use in my home games, and that was what kept me going, was the having fun with it myself, which may not, and not the same thing may not be fun for everybody, so I can totally understand why, spending hours on physical cutting things out just so you can use them briefly before you make the next version might not be everybody's cup of tea. But whatever it is that you like doing, I encourage you to not worry about whether or not it looks commercially viable, um, because and especially in the realm of game design and art, we have a lot of really creative people in our space with us here, and you may look out there and see other people who are lifelong artists making really cool, pretty things that you wish you could do, but don't let that stop you from making the thing that doesn't look as what you think of as good. Make your own style, whether it's how you use layout on a page or whether or not you're just doing sketched drawings. There are some really great monster manuals out there with people's scraggly stick figures that are then interpreted by their readers, because what's more terrifying than a monster no one survives to draw? It's really possible to make cool stuff without it looking beautiful at first. Yeah, I shifted from Microsoft Word when I got smart about things. It was much later. As a teacher, actually, I started using Google Sheets, because I didn't have a Microsoft Excel background, and Google Sheets was simple enough for me to dive into, and I just write up columns and columns and columns of text. And at first, I was hand entering them into fields in images, but my graphic designer, Max Johnson, he is also a game developer and a programmer, and he helped me by building a Python script that would take my CSV files that I could output from my spreadsheets and just load them into my PDFs. And that made it much easier to iterate.
Okay.
And at that point, we could edit cards and get feedback and then make a final set without it being a month-long process.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's a good note. And I think, for me, as I reflect on my own project, for the encouragement for everybody is iterate and take it one step at a time. Make the thing that you can make it something that you're happy with, and then take that and use that momentum. Get help or get input, and just keep building from there. So I think that's great. Speaking of iterating, you've actually got a product going on right now that's the continuation of all of this Game Master's Apprentice. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now that's on Kickstarter?
So I'm fortunate enough to have a physical copy that arrived yesterday of my GameMaster's Apprentice post-apocalypse deck, which I know is not gonna really be readable on a camera, but, there are images of it online. Uh, it is a Fallout and Mad Max-inspired genre deck for the GameMaster's Apprentice 2E or Second Edition. Basically, what that means is it has all of those fields of text and some icons and images meant to help inspire characters, encounters, and depending on how far back you wanna start your prep, maybe the entire apocalypse of your world itself, and allow you to create these things, whether they're ahead of a game, on the fly, or during a solo session. I've been messing around with them, running myself through exploring abandoned vaults and breaking out of cryotubes to re-enter a human wasteland and trying to figure out what happened to the world without having decided it ahead of time myself. And, it's been a lot of fun messing around with them just for my own sake. And we're currently in the middle of the Kickstarter, which runs until August 14th. I try to time my Kickstarters and my writing projects so that I can use my summer breaks as a teacher to finish them, and then that helps me justify not also waiting tables during the summer. And, it's been really, really fun to sort of tackle this, in the year after the Fallout TV show came out, and while it may not be everybody's cup of tea, I found it quite entertaining, and I thought it got to the heart of what made Fallout interesting to me, which was looking at how capitalism and human consumerism is truly the enemy, not just, "Oh, it's a different country or a different group of people that we shouldn't like." And so I really was inspired by that, and we had been hoping to get them out faster, but I really needed the summertime to make sure I could write it and edit it and get it to the best possible state before launching the Kickstarter. So we have this running right now, and it would be finished in a couple of weeks, hopefully, and then I will be doing my final edits and test prints based on feedback from the initial backers, because I always like to show an early version to people who back the Kickstarter so they can help me retool it if they see anything they think is wrong, or if, of course, if I miss something like a typo. And then we get the final product out the door in hopefully 2 months, because it doesn't take that long to finish from this point out. And so I've been having a lot of fun with it, and we're almost done, and that's crazy to me because yet again, we have been doing this for a decade now, and I'm at deck 11. Woof.
Yeah, well, congratulations on being close to the finish line in this one. And this is, by the way, full disclosure, not a sponsored interview, but I highly the GameMaster Apprentice as a low prep game master and also as a solo gamer, I give it a 5-star recommendation, which don't come out often on this channel. So if you're interested in solo tools, or if you like post-apocalyptic, go ahead and check out that Kickstarter. I'm not much of an editor, ironically, as a YouTuber, but I'll make sure I put the link in the description. I'll throw up some pictures here at some point, and go ahead and check that out. All right, as we close our time, Nathan, final question is, what are some of the things that have stuck out to you about this journey, and what's your advice for people in the space that want to be creative, want to make things? What are your kind of final thoughts as we close out our interview here?
One thing you noted earlier is that this is a hobby full of creative people, and I think that's part of what makes it so much fun and has made it possible for me to continue doing my work in this space, because I'm constantly inspired by seeing what other people are doing and realizing that it's actually possible to do the thing yourself. As I mentioned, I got really fortunate and I got hired professionally as a freshman in college, but I never thought I would be running my own business. But also, of course, if I look back further, I never thought I would be working professionally. And then if we go back a few more years, I never thought I would be writing anything anybody else would want to play other than myself. So you don't know what you can do. You just need to try. And it's something I tell my students, you can't get good until you've done something enough times that you have done it badly. It's okay to try and fail, and in fact, it's pretty necessary. So don't be discouraged if the first thing you make isn't up to the vision in your head. Just try again. Keep going. Miss Frizzle, my favorite fictional teacher, you know, get messy, make mistakes. Gotta just keep trying.
Well, as we explore the intersection between role-playing games and teaching, I think that is a great place to end our interview with an encouragement to everybody. Keep making, keep trying, and keep enjoying this fantastic hobby. For one final time, thank you, Nathan, for joining us. I'll go ahead and include links to his website. And until next time, thank you all so much for joining us on Templar's Tabletop. Have a great day and happy gaming.